Hey guys, and welcome to another Schematics update. This time we want to talk about City Skylines, more specifically the question, is it too much DLC? Should they move on to the next one? And for that we invited a couple of people, Jay and Flux and Silv. Hey guys.
Hi. Hello.
Could you please introduce yourself real quick for people out there who have no idea who you are?
I'm Jay. My channel on YouTube is Bsquiklehausen. I make City Skylines videos, but I got my start actually, and I continue to make assets for City Skylines. So modded custom vehicles. I'm working on some network stuff right now, but I'm kind of be playing the role of the modder, I guess, on this, because I talk with a lot of people who are making actual mods for the game. So there's definitely a lot that I have to say from that front about what's going on.
Awesome. I'm Patrick. I'm Fluxtrance on YouTube. And I play City Skylines almost exclusively on YouTube at this point. And I usually play pretty heavily modded and with lots of assets. So I think that's where I'm coming from for this video.
And I'm Silvarret. I also play some City Skylines on my channel. Usually from not as heavily modded, I would say, of a perspective, because I don't know that much about that side of the game, but more general theories of urbanism and urban sustainability and that sort of nerdy stuff. Although I do lurk a lot in the City Skylines creators Discord, where there's always tons of banter, so I think I actually spent more time there than actually playing the game. But yeah, that's basically my perspective in all of this.
And I'm Ed4TV. You probably know me when you're watching the channel for a couple of videos. And I play City Skylines, well, occasionally whenever there is a new update, and I play it for a couple of 100 hours and then I put the game aside again. And I have Blind with me.
Hi, I'm Blind. I stream simulation and management games. When I play cities, it's pretty much the same as AdFo. I play mostly vanilla with a few added assets and a couple quality of life mods, and I play whenever there's a new expansion for roughly 50 to 150 hours, and then I don't touch the game for 6 months.
I should definitely add that I'm trying to mod the game quite often. Basically every time I played the update, I want to go back and want to mod the game heavily, and I'm having an idea in my mind of how the city should turn out in the end, and I install mods for like 15 days in a row and then realize that the game doesn't even start up again, and I'm frustrated, and that's when I say, yeah, go, fuck it. But anyway, let's dive into our topics. The first one is City is 3 years now old. It was released in 2015. And yeah, it's the question, isn't it time to move on, like after 3 years of expansion packs, guys?
As a management game player, here's what I can say. Every single expansion pack for City Skylines feels more like it wasn't intended. So back when we started, the first few expansion packs felt really well thought out. Snowfall, to an extent, After Dark felt perfect. It fit in really well and added in a lot. And as we've gotten further and further away, especially with green cities, and while I like the idea of the upcoming Park Life expansion, it's looking more and more tacked on, and I'm starting to wonder if City Skylines as a product, as a game, has kind of reached the end of its lifespan. The amount you can add on to it has kind of reached its limit. Maybe it's time to move on and make a sequel and add in the ability to expand it further.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Honestly, as these DLCs get further along, it seems like a lot of the things that are being added, I kind of have a preference towards mods and existing assets that I like a little more than the things being added. I think a big example of this would be like the monorail from, I think that was Mass Transit that introduced that. Like, I really like the hanging, what is that? You know, the hanging tram that I think Ronix made that.
Suspended monorail, yeah.
Yeah, I guess that was still a variant of the monorail, but even that I liked better than just using the regular monorails, or, you know, some mods that exist currently just seem like they do a better job anyway at a lot of the things that are being introduced. So I don't know. I don't really see a lot of what's being added as being that critical. And I think that the thing that really holds back the community would be, you know, not having a better based game. So just having like a new game released rather than new DLC, I think would be the way to go.
I'm actually going to play the other side on this, and I genuinely think so. I'd like more DLCs. I get what you guys are saying about it feeling tacked on. I think that Green Cities really kind of was. I think it was overall poorly implemented, but I think there's more stuff to still improve off this one. And I think a very important part that we're maybe not considering is that starting with the City Skylines 2 kind of throws out the work of almost the entire modding community in a lot of ways. I know a lot of people would have to either rewrite mods from scratch, remake them from scratch, or give them massive time-consuming overhauls. I mean, there are people who have hundreds of assets up on the workshop, and I don't know, I just finished having to redo a whole bunch of my assets already to match the game's style because it's gotten better and more detailed lately. And man, I don't want to have to do that again for a whole different game that might require a whole bunch more pieces and parts and things that it has to actually like change. So I know one of the things I've been kind of wanting publicly is like better rendering, better graphics. But at the same time, I don't want to have to go through and change hundreds of models to support better graphics and remake them all and retexture and everything. Like that's huge. And I think that there's a lot of content that just wouldn't get updated and we'd lose it in a transition to a second game.
I think that actually makes a lot of sense. It wasn't something that I was thinking of before. I just felt like it's only time to start working on Cities 2 and stop supporting this game when it doesn't make any money anymore. And I think so far all of the DLCs have at least still been successful in reinvigorating the community, getting people back, getting people to play the game and stream the game, etc. again. And this is going to come back later when we get to the argument of whether there are too many DLCs, because that's going to rack up eventually. But I think that at least from selling the game perspective, they shouldn't stop yet, and they probably won't stop yet, because I think they can still release at least one more DLC and make the game viable that way.
I'm the first one to say in our planned coaster videos, Frontier will support the game as long as the DLC make them money. And I totally understand that the thing that companies do. The question, I think, is more if we break it down, what's the benefit of a new game and what's the benefit of keeping City Skylines 1 and expanding it?
Pulling from a later topic, which is the total cost of the DLCs. In order to keep a community alive and keep a community flourishing, you need to have new people coming in. And I've been getting to a point recently where either I'm streaming a new expansion pack for Cities or I'm talking to people about Cities. And there's a lot of people out there who haven't played Cities either since the game first dropped and they never picked up a DLC, or alternatively have never played Cities and they've just never picked up a single set of DLC. And the reason for that is because that mountain of DLC is getting ominous to any new player looking at the game. It's starting to have the Europa Universalis problem where nobody wants to play the game because there's a ridiculous amount of DLC. So then you're having this larger barrier for new players alongside of the learning curve of whether or not you want to start installing mods, because mod stacking is terrifying in Cities. And the combination of people not wanting to start playing the game because there's a lot of DLC, and then the learning curve of all of the mods on top of that, I think is going to start over the next few years shrinking the player base because there will be more people that just aren't willing to start playing in the first place.
That makes a lot of sense. I think there's probably just a point of critical mass when there's just so much DLC, there's just so much content, even in the Steam Workshop maybe, because in the earliest days it would be really easy to find mods, but nowadays people even get lost trying to find out which mods and assets they can or cannot install. And then there's still all the DLC which you need to buy as well, all of the gameplay that you need to get used to, and the increasing level of difficulty of getting used to the game. So there's probably, I guess, a certain moment where at some point it's going to be better to start making Cities 2 rather than release another DLC.
The thing I think of most as a Cities 2, like a reason to make that, is I'm on the Steam page for Cities right now looking at the minimum specs. It's like a Core 2 Duo, 4 gigs of RAM, a GTX 260. Like, you can't really raise the minimum specs of a game after launch, but I feel like if they were to stop targeting these systems, we'd be able to do more stuff. I mean, the game already doesn't run well on those systems, but it runs. I remember on launch day, I had to play the game on my MacBook Air because I was in class. And I'm like, I'm not missing this day one launch. And it was not a great experience. I don't want to say that people who only have bad computers can't play the game anymore. That feels bad, but it'd be really nice to have a version with higher vehicle limits, better pathing. Like, thanks to Traffic Manager, thanks to some of the mods that we have where you can turn on like amount of route recalculation. We know that that doesn't break the game in any way. It slows it down, which I think is something that Colossal Order really tried to avoid with the minimum specs, and kind of, I want to say how simplistic the base game is, because it's actually fairly complicated, but to try and kind of layer on these advanced features will take extra computing power that I don't think Colossal Order wants to commit to and raise those minimum specs. So that's what I think that Cities Cities 2, because you could really go and be like, all right, Cities 2, fine, let's go. Minimum specs, a decent i5.
As the years go on, everybody gets better specs as well, so that's something to be expected.
Yeah.
I don't think it would alienate as many people as they'd expect, but at the same time, I know there are a lot of vanilla players out there. I see that in my mod stats and everything. Like, you can look, and the number of people that own the game and that play the game is so much less than the number of people that download even the most popular mods and things.
Don't you mean so much more?
It's the other way around, but yeah, you're good.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the number of people that play the game vanilla is still really high.
I am one of those people a lot of the time.
Oh, God.
Whenever there is a new expansion, I uninstall everything. And the first 2 weeks is basically just vanilla, and then after that I plop in a few mods here and there. And in general, my biggest problem with Cities from the beginning has always been the game is easy.
It is easy.
As a management game, it's very chill, it's fun to play, it's not super thought heavy until you have to manage traffic. Outside of that, as far as a city builder goes, it's not particularly engaging. It's not a game that's going to hold me for 50,000 hours. I always compare City Skylines to games like SimCity 3000, which was genuinely a hard game where you could just lose at any point. You could go from being a fully successful city to making one bad decision, then suddenly your city is full of trash and you have to throw everything out the window and start again practically.
No, I definitely agree that Cities is easy. I also would argue that Cities is accessible. I was a little kid back when SimCity 3000 and SimCity 4 came out. Literally all I did with both of those games is just load up the pre-made cities and drop disasters on them. That was all I did, and I loved it. I had such a good time. But whenever I tried to play, it was so hard for me when I was young. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out why these houses weren't growing. I'd place the power, I'd place the water, I'd run the tutorial, I'd knew the mechanics, but I couldn't figure out a way to make it work or make it work in an interesting way. But I see a lot of people that seem to be able to do that with City Skylines. I see a lot of, and I don't want to dump on a whole bunch of people, but I see a lot of really bad interchanges and things posted to the City Skylines subreddit, and people are like, I'm so proud, look, I finally figured it out. And to me, that doesn't make it look easy, it makes it accessible. It makes me like, you know what, these are people who probably would have struggled with a harder game still playing it. There's not a lot of challenge, that's for sure. But I think there's a lot of customization. There's certainly a lot of time, but once you've played the game modded, or even when you haven't, you can still dump hundreds of hours into a city trying and fine-tuning things. I've seen people try and do full recreations of places. I've seen a lot of people move from really detailed city building to starting to make assets and starting to make mods, which I think is really cool. It's like, oh, I can't make this with the normal game. Let me activate my personal hard mode difficulty and start modding.
Right.
I want to pick up at the point where Blind said that every time a new DLC drops, he uninstalls every mod and plays the vanilla version of City Skylines. Well, yeah, you're kind of forced to, because new DLC break a lot of mods. So I kind of want to pick up there and say, are they dropping too frequent the DLCs and killing the game for content creators that heavily rely on modded versions of the game?
I don't necessarily think so, to be honest. I mean, it's easy to complain about the game breaking.
But you're one of the content creators complaining about it every time.
Oh, yeah, that's true. And I try not to be, whenever it breaks, I'm usually just like, oh, okay, can't play the game for a week or so. But in all honesty, usually after a week, most of the mods have been fixed, and it's much better as time goes on because there's new things that Colossal Order is doing. There's beta programs for asset creators and mod creators so they can test their mods before the DLCs even release. The time that I really had a problem with it was back in After Dark and I guess a little bit of Snowfall, but the DLCs that dropped that really broke the game in a significant way, that completely changed the way that all the assets needed to be made and really kind of took a lot of things out of commission on the workshop, that was more of an issue. A lot of people that had big cities built just had to throw away their cities, especially after Dark, because all these assets that they used all of a sudden were disappearing. People were taking them off the workshop, or they were changing them and updating them on the workshop. That was a bummer. But I don't think that kind of stuff happens as much anymore. So as much as I'm still in the camp of I'm not really that interested in the DLCs, I still don't think that it breaks the game to a point where people should be really that concerned about it.
I actually agree with that. I think they're doing a decent effort to at least make sure that mod creators can change their mods accordingly as much as they can. And I don't think any of the last DLCs have broken any mods or assets in any really horrible ways. It was just the first DLCs where I guess they just had to kind of get used to that really uncomfortable interaction that they do have in the end between the mod creators and the DLC, because The mod creators are kind of doing the same thing that the DLCs are, but they still need to bring out the DLCs because they are the owners of the whole brand anyway, and they want to be able to get money out of that. I think nowadays there's a pretty healthy relationship between the two. Even if this is perhaps a bit of a critique that you can level at the game, they are very often taking things from the mods and putting them into the game. That's just something that happens with modded games. I mean, everybody was complaining that Minecraft was taking stuff out of mods as well. It's just pretty much inevitable at some point.
As somebody who plays the game in vanilla, I think it's overwhelmingly positive when they do take stuff out of mods and put them into the game, because then I don't have to go download the mods.
Right.
Which is why to this day I think Mass Transit is my favorite update, because it basically made me not have to worry about things like precision engineering anymore, because it was like, oh, well, this is just in the game now.
Yep.
Not only that, but I think that shows that they are listening to the community and see, okay, that mod is very popular because of that reason. Maybe we should implement that in the game.
Right. And I think it's also good because it means that even if you are playing heavily modded, you don't need to get all of these extra mods anymore, but it's included in the game, which makes pretty much everything a little bit easier. That's one less thing to have on your Steam workshop.
With that said, I don't think they ever really implement it very well.
Yeah.
Like, I've never seen a mod that they've implemented into the base game, maybe with the exception of some of the road guideline stuff out of precision engineering, but I still use precision engineering because I get exact measures and angles and things that they don't give in the main game. But it's usually kind of half implemented, which is a little annoying for me and for the mod creators as well, because they have to figure out how to re-implement their stuff to still be interesting and usable and not completely duplicate the vanilla functionality.
I'm sorry to keep bringing up new topics within this little topic, but there are these few DLCs where they let a mod creator create some assets and they put that out as an extra little DLC for people who are interested in that kind of thing. I think that's also an interesting way to support mod creators while adding DLC to the game.
I think those are great. I wish they did more of those, and I've actually been on a campaign to get myself one.
Oh yeah, you should definitely get one.
I like those, and I think that something we're missing as well in this discussion is the console players now. And while I think that the whole idea of a city builder on a console was a little crazy, these DLCs and things are the only way that the console players get new content. And I think that that's kind of a vital lifeline for them. Like, the actual base game of City Skylines was a good framework for more game stuff, for mods, for DLCs, whatever. But when it launched, it had no day-night cycle, had no, like, even sort of vague option for seasons. I know we still don't really have that, but still. No disasters, no great transit options. I know we were talking about the monorail earlier. I wish we could do something like the Metro Overhaul mod, or even something like the SimCity 4 elevated rail to subway transitions from Rush Hour. I understand the idea of separating them gameplay-wise. It can be confusing when, like, why do I have no trains on my elevated track? Because it's a hold-up in your subway somewhere. Like, that's weird, and kind of gameplay-wise, maybe not the most fluid thing. It's like the reason they don't want to do mixed zoning. It's very realistic in real life, and it would probably work pretty well in cities, but it doesn't telegraph very well for gameplay. So splitting up a rail network to subways for underground, trains for ground, and monorails for elevated, I think makes a lot of sense gameplay-wise, even if it doesn't necessarily make sense like realistic city-wise.
Can you tell us a little bit how it is to work with Colossal Order and DLCs and mods?
I've been part of the modding beta program, which I'm not allowed to tell you guys much about, for like 2 weeks, so I don't really have a ton to share there, but it was hard to get in, I guess. And it sort of makes sense just because I only really make assets. But there have been a lot of things, like I used to make assets and things for a game called Kerbal Space Program, and I was in the testing beta program for that very early on and very quickly, which was nice because they encouraged people to make mods and things with the new features and try and get like a really wide gamut. So it's not only people who have like these quote unquote critical mods that they want updated day 1, day 2, day 3 instead of having to wait a week. They wanted people to be able to have mods of the new features very quickly, which I think is something that maybe Colossal Order is only now catching on to, in that they're allowing me into this this program. Because I think it's very cool that if like on day 1 we could automatically have a whole bunch of compatible assets. I'll give an example of After Dark, because I know for a fact that that stuff is not under NDA. But it would be really cool if on launch day for that, a whole bunch of creators already had compatible assets because they had been in a beta from that. I think it's very slowly starting to happen for these newer DLCs for Green Cities, for Park Life, etc. Like I've been a big proponent of wanting to do like an industrial DLC for a long time, having something that really splits that up. And some of my most popular assets are trains and airplanes. I'd love to, if they had some industrial DLC with like a cargo airport and better cargo trains. Day one, as that launches, I have a new like compatible sets of freight airplanes and freight trains that all worked properly and looked good and took advantage of all the new features, so that people who do play modded have that option and aren't stuck with like, well, ferries are in, but I only have a vanilla ferry for a few weeks. I don't know if that necessarily even answered your question.
Sorry, I was away having a pee and getting myself another beer.
Jesus, you are the absolute worst host ever of the podcast.
Just ask a question so you can go take a piss and get some beer.
I was wondering what you were doing when you muted. It's like he's either dying and coughing or he's like left.
Welcome to Schematics. That's how we do it here.
I feel like personally the only thing that but this is really wishful thinking, is to kind of make things to make them more compatible to modding. So for instance, the Snowfall DLC added that nice gondola thing, which I think doesn't look very good.
The mass transit?
I get confused because I actually wanted Snowfall to add a ski lift, but then Mass Transit did it. But I always felt like that would have been a nice thing to be more open to modders, so that modders could very easily add in their own pylons or add in their own gondola designs, because the one in-game isn't that realistic. But if you're a modder, you can't just easily tack onto that and create your own content for it, I think.
They can.
Yeah, they can.
Really?
Yeah, I think you can actually. Just not popular.
To take from that, I have a monorail mod, but it's got like maybe 2,000 downloads, which for my stuff is very low.
Yeah.
If I look at a planes pack that I have right next to it, 7,200 subscribers.
Wow.
Right, but I mean, at the same time, there's that, we talked about it earlier, but Ronix made that hanging monorail. That's got to be like one of the most popular like custom transit options, right? That was adapted from the monorail, I think. So I think it's, it is possible. It's just less popular with the community, so people don't do it as often.
Well, you know what? I'm looking at that now. The suspended monorail itself, 8,800 subscribers. So I think it's popular in the heavily modded or detailed community. I know one of the things that kind of made Ronix very disappointed in the game was right when road modding came out, he went and poured a ton of time into his expressways, and those have very few subscribers.
Yeah.
Like those have ended up kind of unfortunately and sadly unpopular. I think that there are a lot of people who really want very simple mods.
Simple mods are good mods.
In fact, that's been kind of a driving point for a lot of the mods I've been making lately. So I'm trying to make a custom big suspension bridge, which is probably, hopefully at least, already going to have come out when this episode comes out. I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. So I'm talking in the creators Discord. I'm talking a lot to other creators, and they're like, yeah, no, it'll just let it be a building that people will plop. No, I don't want that. I want somebody to be able to click and drag and end up with a really good looking bridge. I want it to be as easy as possible and for it to make as much sense as possible for somebody who's literally, this is the only thing they've installed. Because even I have some stuff where it's like, yeah, you download these 2 packs, props come in a different download. And it's just kind of, I think, a little confusing for a lot of people who aren't necessarily the people who are making content for it. People who are just playing the game and using content. It's just like, wait a minute, I want to get the same commuter train that I ride to work every day. Let's just download this so I can have that driving through the city. In fact, that's how I used to play. That's how I started making mods, because I was going and dropping off a friend at a local train station. And I'm like, you know what? That would be a lot cooler than the weird European like high-speed train they have running commuter service. Let's make that. And I think a lot of people do that, but just look in the workshop for something that's easy for them.
But a lot of people don't start with downloading mods, but buying DLCs. What a nice segue. That leads us to the question we barely touched earlier. Are there too many DLCs? Blind, you have picked this topic because there are a lot of DLCs that cost a lot of money. Maybe you can take it away.
Yeah, I see, especially on Reddit and other various places, the DLCs are great and I love playing them, but they're either expensive, and I think Park Life is going to be the most expensive one if you include the radio station version, which scares people away even if they don't look at what's in it. They just look at the price tag and go, nope. I'm seeing that more and more, especially with people who bought the game really cheap, and then they look at the rest of the DLCs and then they go, The more DLCs you add onto that list, the more daunting it is. Earlier, Jay mentioned the asset packs that were made by a specific creator. People look at those from a distance, and yes, they're great. They support the creators, they support the community, but they add on to that total DLC count. The more money worth of DLC you have on Steam, the higher the barrier to entry is because people are intimidated by that.
Agreed.
While having more DLCs is great, having more additions to the game is great, and developing the game is great, you're either having to very deeply discount the game, which they do. They've done a bunch of free weekends, and they've discounted the game very heavily. But I don't think that's enough when you have over $100 in DLC now. In Canada, it's $129 in DLC, and I think we were talking about this earlier. It was roughly 120 US, if I remember correctly.
116 euros/dollars.
That's not counting the price of the base game, which normally, when it's not on sale, is $30. So that's intimidating. And people don't even make it into the workshop to see what's there.
Yeah.
Should they go the Skyrim route? Now, the Skyrim route is, back when Skyrim first launched, they had 3 planned DLC. They put out those 3 DLCs, and then they did a second edition of the game, increased it back up to $60, and bundled all the DLC. What if City Skylines went that route? And bundle all of the DLC into the base game, bump the price up by $10, and start adding onto that.
I mean, honestly, I'd be all for that. I think if they added some features and they really enhanced the engine and they really designed the game for adding mods, because it's very clear with this game we have now that it wasn't really designed to have like a ton of mods. They weren't really anticipating the amount of custom content. I mean, how could they? It's like, what, over 100,000 things on the workshop right now? Like, it's absurd.
SimCity 2013 failed. And then City Skylines came out, and I think it was supposed to be like an indie attempt, like a small attempt, small scale at capturing whatever of this niche market is left. And it's exploded. It's huge.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's way bigger than anybody anticipated. I think it's way bigger than Paradox anticipated. I think it's way bigger than Colossal Order anticipated.
Oh, definitely.
It means that the game, as it's played now by some people, is not necessarily the game that Colossal Order originally designed. I'm looking at the Steam page now for City Skylines, and they have that stupid deluxe edition still that literally just comes with like the soundtrack, which is bad, and the crap, I'm forgetting, like an art book or something, which is really dumb. Don't sell the deluxe edition. Who cares? Give everybody the deluxe edition content. I paid for the deluxe edition a little while ago, but whatever. It means nothing. They also have this thing called the New Player Bundle, which bundles City Skylines, Snowfall, and Natural Disasters, which I think is a weird choice. And then bundle in, like, After Dark is still on sale for $15.
That is basically mandatory at this point.
Yeah, that's the essential. Why do they got Natural Disasters in there? They should put After Dark in there.
After Dark wasn't really even worth it then. And for it to still be $15 is crazy to me. They should bundle now in the base game for $30 or $35, After Dark, Snowfall, Natural Disasters, and maybe Mass Transit. Like, sell 2 of the latest DLCs as optional, bundle the rest, and have that be basically the only way you can get it. I also think they need to figure out a different way to sell these radio stations, because I'm never going to buy them. I'm not going to bother.
Yeah, why would you even use radio stations? Doesn't everybody play with, like, Spotify in the background or something?
Yeah, that's what you'd think.
That all adds up to a different question. What does sell the game? Is it the content creators with their modded version and their amazing looking cities? Is it the constant flow of new DLCs, or maybe even the mods? Additionally, what keeps the people interested in the game?
I don't know. Maybe I'm biased. I think that people seeing creators show their stuff off, whether it be on Reddit or Twitch or YouTube, I feel like that is a really big draw. I mean, I think that on like day one and even the first maybe year the game was out, having the game like on top on Steam was probably a good way to have, you know, lots of sales. But I feel like nowadays, most people that get drawn to this game are seeing someone else play it, and that's how they get into it. And I just don't really think that has much to do with DLC.
I think we're at a point right now where there's 2 separate audiences coming into cities. Whenever the game goes on sale, there are, you know, your casual city builders or people who play games who are like, you know, I just want something to chill with. And those are the people who don't even install mods, as Jay was talking about earlier. And then you have the people who go into City Skylines as a city painter or a city designer, which usually go through the content creation side of things. Maybe they started playing Planet Coaster first and doing detail stuff there, and then they moved over to cities, which I've seen happen a couple times. Or alternatively, they just stumble upon one of your guys' videos and go, okay, you know what, this is something I want to try and do, and then they try it. What's actually selling the game here? Is it Steam sales or is it content creators? Content creators are free advertising. We're keeping interest. We're making people think about it. And that does push people towards the game. But a lot of people, they go over to cities and then they see that stack of DLC and they go, man, nope. And then the sales roll around and then they pick up the game because of deep discounts and whatever. But they don't discount the DLCs as much. And that's how they make their money. So we're at a point now where it's like, you should never buy City Skylines at $30. You buy it when it's $5.25 and 85% off. But then all of your DLCs are only 25% off.
Yep.
I honestly think they should do some sort of anniversary edition where they bundled main DLCs, you know, just After Dark, Snowfall, Mass Transit, maybe Disasters, because some people like that, and then put that together into some sort of anniversary edition and put that out as a separate product for, I don't know, $50.
I agree, actually, because adding all the extra separate DLCs, and this might sound a little bit stupid, but it's just annoying to have to go through the process of buying everything as well when when you really just want to get everything in one go, and that might actually stop me from getting something. Honestly, in the past, I've been too lazy for many months to get a DLC because it's just a bit of an annoying process.
It's kind of like The Sims 3.
Yeah.
There was just like an absurd amount of DLC, and nobody ever wants to just sit there on the Steam page and buy all of it.
And if they did bundle everything together into some sort of anniversary edition, then we could potentially get that engine update that Jay was talking about earlier.
Yeah, I still think that's needed, even for like the basic graphics, because even though we all have like so many different graphic mods now, and thank God that we've got ways of getting better resolution, there's still some basic stuff about the game itself, like the anti-aliasing, which I think is just still pretty horrible.
Well, for one thing, it's built in Unity. Like, imagine if Colossal Order came up with their own game engine that's designed for a city builder. Like, that would be incredible. And, you know, on top of that, we talked about how it wasn't even made to be this big modding-wise. Like, if they had better mod support, if they had... And you can tell, like, right off the bat that this game is not made for that kind of stuff. Like, if you're in the content manager in the menu and you're trying to manage your mods, it's super buggy. Like, if you got more than 100 mods, you know what I'm talking about. You click disable all or enable all, and your game just, like, crashes.
Is this a problem that a lot of people face?
No, probably not. But it's probably very few people.
Every time I'm like, man, this sucks. Like, I hate this. I'm like, wait a minute. There are probably maybe 1,000 people that play this much. With this many mods.
Like 10 other people.
More than 1,000 people, but...
It doesn't affect the core player base, but I feel like a large chunk of people do play for mods, and a lot of people stay away from the game because they're afraid of mods causing issues. But if the game was designed better for mods, like I imagine a future, a game that you can add mods to as if you're adding libraries to some code base. There's a really, really clean API that's built out, and it's very cut and dry what modders can do to tweak the game further without causing issues. And there's kind of a promise, a spoken promise between Colossal Order and the modders that's like, here's the API we're providing you with, we're not going to change these things, so go ahead and make mods based off this API, and it's not going to cause issues in the future when we add DLC and things like that. To me would be like worth it alone just to have a new game. But on top of that, maybe a new game engine that's built by Colossal Order and not just Unity. If we already have City Skylines from a 9-person team using Unity as a game engine, imagine what could happen if we had, you know, this new large Colossal Order that's made all this money from City Skylines, putting all their time and their experience into a custom game engine and a new game that's mod friendly. I mean, that to me sounds incredible. But obviously, you know, we're talking about a company that has to make money, so there's other things involved too.
I guess the question there is, could they make lightning strike twice?
That's true.
Because that's what City Skylines was. City Skylines was perfect timing, right place, polished game that felt good and exploded. Mm-hmm. Could anybody replicate that? I mean, look at Avon Colony. How many people played that?
Well, Avon Colony was not the same concept.
Surviving Mars.
Yeah, even Surviving Mars.
Frostpunk.
Frostpunk's doing really well, to be fair.
It's doing really well.
Not as well as Cities.
It sold almost 1 million copies. That's pretty good.
I know, but something tells me it's not going to have the same long tail as Cities. I'm ready to be proved wrong.
Oh, absolutely not. It's not designed as that type of game.
So just out of curiosity, I did just search Cities Skylines straight up on YouTube, and I get 4 videos from somebody who mods a little bit, 1 old vanilla video, then Flux's heavily modded Avalon Episode 1, then Strict's heavily modded FPS, a heavily modded 2 hours 20, a barely modded Biffa from 6 hours ago, so like a new one, then Strict doing a vanilla game, then more barely modded official Park Life thing, vanilla, barely modded, specifically vanilla, Paradox official teaser.
I don't know how fair it is to judge it based on that though, because all the ones that are less modded are, well, for one thing, they're like 3 years ago, 6 months ago, older stuff from when the game was at like its absolute peak, and it was just the biggest content creators making videos on them. Almost all the current videos are heavily modded, except for maybe like Flabaliki, who's actually still doing modding. So
the game is no longer at its peak. I think we're well past that, but I don't know, it's really hard to judge kind of where popularity is coming from. It would be nice to have Strict Toaster here, but he's gallivanting around in Europe. But I feel like somebody like Strict Toaster might be kind of at the carrying capacity for heavily modded City Skylines videos.
As far as like just raw numbers and numbers of videos he puts out, yeah.
About raw numbers, about how many people that sort of content maybe attracts specifically. I don't want to like, again, discount you, Flux, but I think that you have a bunch of people who are there for Planet Coaster stuff and even RollerCoaster Tycoon stuff from back in the day.
I don't think there's really that much of a carrying capacity. I just released this new project like 4 days ago, and I tripled the number of views that I usually get on videos just on any given day, and I got like 1,000 new subscribers yesterday. Like, I don't necessarily think there's a carrying capacity. I think that we're far from having anybody that is a mod heavy or an asset heavy creator that is actually at the peak of, people who enjoy that kind of content. I think that there's always going to be new people that want to check that out.
I can back this up actually. When I uploaded the first Oslo episode a few weeks back, that hit tens of thousands of views in a few days as well.
I mean, that's like 2 examples, but I still think that there's a lot more going on than I don't think that anyone's necessarily at the carrying capacity yet.
Real quick, unplanned question. Who's buying the game now? Management players or more the design sandbox players? What do you think?
I think more people are buying the game at this point because of the modded builds versus the city building aspect, because all of the management game players don't play cities because, as the problem that I mentioned earlier, cities is too easy. They'd rather play something like Factorio or something like, even in the other direction, the grand strategy games. They'd rather play Stellaris. That's what we wanted out of Surviving Mars, and mostly got, is a management game.
I love Factorio. I play the hell out of it. But I have to be in such a specific mood to want to play Factorio. I want to hate my computer. I want to hate this stupid game. But I don't know. I feel like City Skylines could be super zen. In fact, that's why I think Sips picked it up recently, because he was playing a bunch of hard games. It's I want something chill that I can relax with. I think why a bunch of people are going to keep coming back to it.
I can actually back this up because sometimes I'd like to go on Steam and put in the launch options to have no workshop and just play the game vanilla just to relax, because honestly that is still really relaxing and definitely way less taxing on my mental health than playing with mods.
That's what I'll be doing when the DLC comes out.
I think even mods is pretty relaxing.
While we're name dropping here, I think the only person on Twitch that I know, aside from Sip, who plays cities, would be EJSA.
I was a big EJ fan when he played in KSP and doing that space shuttle.
You can see him getting more and more frustrated with the capabilities of the game because he's been working on one city for several years now, it feels like. And he's had to start over a couple times because he gets frustrated with the capabilities of the game because he just kind of maxes it out. And it's the game literally can't handle what you're working on now. Yeah. It's just falling apart underneath you, whether that be traffic management, whether that be the ability for the game to even run when you have over 1 million people in your city. It's just...
That's actually a very good segue to our basically last topic that I kind of want to expand a little bit in saying what would be the benefit of a new City Skylines or City Skylines 2 besides adding things that the DLCs and mods added into the base game, in your opinion?
Can I tell you what I wouldn't want them to do?
Sure.
What EA did with Sims 4, and that's let's take everything out and start with the DLC from the start again.
Yeah, that'd be lame.
I agree, but the answer is way too short for me to go to the toilet again and grab another beer, so please continue.
Wait, you already drank a whole beer again?
Yeah.
Pretty impressive.
I think he's on round 3 now.
Yeah, the next one will be the third one, yeah.
No, I said you were a terrible host earlier, but I definitely commend your ability to host a podcast while drinking beer.
Thanks.
He is the best host. This is what you don't understand.
Well, if no one else has anything to say, I have some stuff to say about this.
Go ahead, please.
So, like I said earlier, I think that the number one thing that I want out of a new game is an engine built by Colossal Order or by whoever, builds the game, I guess. I feel like that could solve so many problems. For one thing, I think that the limits in the game right now are kind of a bummer. I don't think there's really a reason to have object limits, or at least there should be a way to turn them off. And I have a feeling that has to do with Unity, whether it be hard limits or limits that they impose so that they can keep the, game requirements low. But if they had their own custom engine that was built for this kind of game, I could really see almost unlimited games. I could see better traffic AI because they're, managing all the entities better. Things like that, I think, would just overall make the game better and be a better platform for mods. I just don't think that the current game we have is that platform. I think that they didn't design it necessarily with all this stuff in mind, and we could have a better game that is designed for that.
They designed it as a management game, not a modding sandbox.
That's true.
This is a quick note. In terms of traffic management and simulation, I was really surprised. I worked a little bit with some professional traffic simulation software called Sumo. It's open source. It does it in the exact same way as cities, with nodes, and you can only change lanes on nodes and whatever. I was really surprised.
Right.
So I'm not even necessarily sure that without some genuine, actual, state-of-the-art innovation, it might be tricky for them to make it much better, or any better necessarily.
In other words, you're saying that the traffic simulation is actually really on point and comparable to simulations that are actually used in the field.
In some ways, yeah.
Well, I mean, Sumo's open source, though. I imagine that there's other software.
There's it's called VisSim. The one city simulation engine that I'm really interested in and have been following has been Citybound.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's been in development for a long time.
Like, if they were to hire that guy and make a City Skylines 2 based on that engine with art assets and whatever,
Hire that guy.
that's what I can see being okay. But it'd still be really frustrating to start a lot of this stuff from scratch. I'm sure it'd be daunting for Colossal Order too. Be like, okay, well, we don't want to lose a lot of these. So City Skylines 2 will have to launch with a day-night cycle, with seasons, with disasters, with all this stuff that they've built. And it takes time to rebuild that stuff.
But isn't that how games evolve in general? I mean, you put out part 1 of a game series and add a lot of stuff in DLCs that are in the second installment of the series from the scratch. Isn't that how it works in general? And another question I'm asking myself is, yeah, sure, you need to start from the scratch, at least the modders, when a second game comes out. But isn't that a thing that is unavoidable at some point? Maybe not now, but maybe in a year or in 2 years?
Yeah, I agree with that. And then even more importantly, I don't really think that you would lose that much of the work we've already made. Like, all the assets that exist now, I mean, you need to have some sort of like .obj file or something. Like, in its raw form, it's just a 3D model, right? I mean, you know, if you've backed up all of your models, you could take those and port them to the new game, and it wouldn't be, you know, like a start all over kind of thing.
City Skylines is, as weird as it seems and as inconsistent as it now is based pretty heavily on a single art style.
That's true, yeah.
Part of the reason why I have to keep updating my assets is because modders are changing the art style of the game. It's much more detailed now.
Mm-hmm.
So my original stuff matched vanilla. It was very flat colors, very bright, very cheery. And then I had to go through and dirty it all up and make it look all...
Now it's all photorealism.
Yeah, exactly, because people are using photo textures. People are using these very, very detailed textures and models and things that get you very close in, but it doesn't match the original vanilla game anymore. And I mean, especially if City Skylines 2 were to change the rendering engine or make it more pretty with physically based rendering or some other kind of more modern rendering technology, you'd need to, while yes, you'd still have all your original texture files and things, you'd still have to go back and touch up every single building there is, which is crazy.
Wouldn't that be better in the long run?
That sounds to me like, don't make the new cities look even more realistic because the mods and assets wouldn't be able to keep up. But that doesn't seem like an argument at all. That just sounds like these mods and assets were made for an older version. We might have to remake textures, but like, I'm all for that. Like, I'll take a base game that looks gorgeous and has a new engine that can support more assets and mods and can support a more complex simulation. I'm all for that, even if it means we have to start over on mods and assets. That seems like, you know, we shouldn't hold the game back because of the current state of assets and mods. That's what I'm trying to say.
A lot of assets and mods were made for RollerCoaster Tycoon 2 before RollerCoaster Tycoon 3 came out. A lot of people moved over to 3.
Yeah, it's true.
Colossal Order, by the way, is still 17 people. I just looked it up.
Is it really?
Yeah, they're a tiny team.
Man, they did not expand well, did they?
That, I think, is a huge challenge for a complete overhaul, including graphics. And that's not to mention how hard it would be to create your own engine. I think building off the back of Unity seems like an awkward fit, and maybe. I mean, we have vehicle limits, we have prop limits, we have a lot of stuff that seems to be Unity based, but it means that they can, like, imagine having to test and port an engine from scratch. I mean, there's a reason why Titanfall is built on Valve's source engine. It's because making your own engine is hard as hell.
The reason why I brought the engine thing up is because Frontier has their own engine, and Frontier, I think, is very comparable to what Colossal Order should aspire to be. I see Frontier as a company that made some good games, and then they made a really good game. They made Planet Coaster and also Elite Dangerous. When those two games came out, they expanded really well. The team got bigger, they kept working on their engine, and they have this awesome engine that lets them do really cool things. Like, there's no way that they could have the same terraforming capabilities and lighting effects in Planet Coaster without their own engine.
Frontier is kind of a different thing. We could talk about the quality of their games as video games for another 6 hours if you really want to.
Yeah, for real.
Oh, yeah, easy.
Alongside of some games that they've made in the past that weren't very good, also running in that same technology.
That plus, I think an in-house engine isn't always a benefit, because that's one of the reasons we don't have modding in Planet Coaster.
It is the reason.
Exactly.
It's because they don't want to compromise the safety of players in Elite. If they were to open up their engine for mod support, then bam, Elite Dangerous is open as well.
Yep.
And then you can destroy that game which is what's making Frontier money.
Thanks for making the point. Yeah, I think it's a benefit of using Unity because it's open anyway, and it's quite easy to adopt mods.
I guess when this conversation started, I was under the impression that Colossal Order had expanded a lot more than they actually did. With all the success that Cities Skylines had, you would think that they would be a bigger company at this point, or that they would be investing more in more developers. Because I really do think that it's possible to design a game engine specifically for a type of game. And if, in the case of Colossal Order, if they were going to be making more cities type games as they were intending on doing, all these games could benefit from modding. And if they design the engine more towards modding rather than, Frontier, who needs to make sure that games like Elite Dangerous don't get affected by modding with their engine. I don't know. I still think it's possible. I think it would be the next step, really, in a simulation game, because I think the top tier simulation games are going to have their own engines.
I think that makes sense, but I don't think it makes sense for Colossal Order to grow in the kind of company that Frontier is, because what I think makes the difference for Frontier is that they're independent. Mm-hmm. They're not just a developer like Colossal Order. They're everything, and they have everything in-house. They have all the marketeers. They've got a lot of PR people. They're everything from start to finish, whereas Colossal Order develops the game. I think it's that which has allowed Frontier to grow so much in recent years that I don't think Colossal Order would be able to even get anywhere close to that level in the near future.
A bigger team doesn't necessarily means a better result comparing to EA and SimCity. Having a small team has a big benefit that everybody has to be streamlined and has a clear idea of the goal.
Yeah.
So it could be a benefit to be a small team, and I think in Colossal Order's case, at least what we are seeing, it holds true to that.
I think that works for some places, but some things like art assets that just take man hours, I think you need a lot of people for that.
Definitely.
Imagining how much effort it would take. And I'm looking back and my entire output of assets over 2.5, 3 years of modding has been like maybe a couple hundred things. And trying to imagine like full cities worth of assets, like having to make dozens of vehicles and hundreds of building assets and set them all up with props and variations and get it all working and it's taking me such a long time to make one stupid little network. I'm like, holy crap. One, how do the devs do it? But two, how do the network extension guys do it? Like, that's one dude making all this stuff.
Can I be devil's advocate here for a second?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's why you have modders. Like, make 200 assets for buildings and let the fucking modders do the rest.
Sounding a lot like Atari on RollerCoaster Tycoon World there, buddy.
I was going to bring up Transport Fever and Train Fever, which tried that.
Yeah.
But Transport Fever is also a much better video game, in my opinion.
Than City Skylines? Oh boy.
It's a more compelling management game. Doesn't run well, it's full of problems, it breaks constantly, it's not very well made, but as a compelling, difficult management game, it's better.
I think you can't compare Transport Fever and City Skylines at all.
And Cities? Yeah, it's hard.
It's also a much smaller game. It never struck lightning like City Skylines did. There is a world, there is an alternate universe somewhere where City Skylines sold 300,000 copies and nobody made assets.
It's called Cities in Motion 2.
That's not a city builder, though.
That's true. A lot of people thought it was going to be.
Cities in Motion is what you can compare to Transport Fever.
That was a good point, yeah.
I played more Cities in Motion 2 than I think I did of Cities Skylines until a few weeks ago.
What? Oh, until a few weeks. What? Are you serious?
Yeah, Cities in Motion 2? I guess not. I played a hell of a lot of Cities in Motion 2. That was a great game.
Cities in Motion 1 was good. Cities in Motion 2 was a different story. Anyway.
Nah, 2 is better than 1.
Guys, I kind of want to have a conclusion round. What do you think should be the way to go? More DLCs or a new game?
My conclusion is kind of where I started, and I haven't really been convinced any other way. I think they should bundle a bunch of the DLCs together and release an anniversary edition in a year or two, upgrade the engine slightly, keep the same mod support and keep the base very similar so everything's still compatible and people don't have mental breakdowns, and sell the game, maybe add an extra $5 or $10 to the price tag and keep going. Keep adding DLCs. Or stop adding DLCs. Either or.
I can only agree with that. Only thing that I'm thinking of that I haven't said so far is if they continue with DLCs, I feel like a few DLCs would be okay, but I haven't seen them do any like local DLCs. I think it would be interesting to see something like an East Asian DLC, or I guess they already have a European sort of DLC, but like thematic DLCs based on regions in the world I thought would be really interesting. All of the City Skylines games did things like this, and I thought it would be cool to have a DLC which added lots of assets in a certain theme, because at some point you're gonna run out of specific themes otherwise, which I think you could kind of see in green cities and park life becoming more vague concepts.
Well, given that they're using Unity as the engine, I don't really see how they could upgrade it very well. But coming from like the business standpoint of Colossal Order, I would say I probably agree with Blind. I think they should probably just release some sort of anniversary edition where they bundle all the DLC into a version of the game and then keep going from there. But purely from my perspective, I think that the only way to go for like a future game that's really interesting would be to just make a new game. I don't really see Colossal Order going anywhere from just continuing to make DLC, and I think that they're in a unique position where this small studio got big and they've got a lot of money. I think now's the time to put all that money into a new game. But I don't know if that's the smartest business decision, but I definitely think in terms of the future of their company, that would be an interesting choice to make, and I would like to see it.
I think something sort of like the Skyrim route is the better option. I don't know whether I'd actually go and release like a full anniversary edition, but lower the price of the old ones permanently. Maybe bundle them. I don't know. It seems like the console version could be a good place to figure out where to bundle stuff. After Dark comes with the console version, and it doesn't come with the PC version, which is nuts.
That's weird.
I think they can keep working on this. I think that obviously we don't want the City Skylines dev cycle to end up being like an actual console's life cycle. I guess be like 10 years of City Skylines. I think would be insane. But I think there's a little more left. I kind of hope that there's more left as well.
So first of all, I want to thank Jay and Flux and Silv for joining and talking with us about City Skylines and the potential future of City Skylines.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And to our listeners and viewers, thanks a lot for listening and viewing. If you liked this video, you may want to consider heading over to Ko-fi, where you can buy the editor a coffee so he can stay up all night editing this video and videos to come in the future. Thanks for listening again. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye guys.